Спасибо большое. Добрый день.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I'm glad to welcome all of you at the International Economic Forum in St. Petersburg, in the city which throughout all its history was the symbol of openness of Russia, its desire to choose the best world experience and cooperate and move forward together. First of all, I'd like to thank the guests of the forum, politicians, business people, for their interests and confidence in our country. We see you as, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, as serious and long-term partners. And that is why, in accordance with the tradition, here at the St. Petersburg Forum, we always discuss openly and with trust our achievements and new possibilities for cooperation. And of course, we also discuss our problems and difficulties which we face. And we also speak about tasks which we have yet to solve. We met many of you a year ago, and since that period, the situation in which the world and Russian economy are developing has changed seriously, and it has changed very drastically on some directions, in some areas. Russia is limited in its access in the world capital market. We should add also the price downfall on our main export goods. The consumer demand has also been reduced, which used to push up the economy. But I agree with the participants of the discussions which have already taken place yesterday. And I agree with that the demand begins to restore itself. If we speak about the energy carriers prices, on which our economy still depends a lot, the average Urals price in 2013 was $107.9 per barrel. In 2014, $96, and January-March this year, it's $56 per barrel, the average price. According to the Rosstat estimates, the Russian GDP fell by 2.2% at this period as compared with the same period last year. The industry manufacturing has been reduced by 1.5%. What I'd like to note, at the end of last year, many people predicted, as you well know, deep crisis in Russia, and this has not happened. We have managed to stabilize the situation, to draw the line across the negative situation fluctuations, and we are successful in going through the difficulties because the Russian economy has accumulated the inner strength quite well. We have the positive trade surplus. We are increasing non-raw commodity exports, and what I'd like to give as an example to illustrate this fact, the volume of non-raw export in first quarter of 2015 has grown by 17%. The export of highly processed goods in this first quarter was about $7 billion, which is the growth of about 6%. And in the cost, it was 7% and 15% in the physical volume. We have maintained our control over inflation. Yes, it of course boosted up because of the ruble devaluation, but now this trend is going down after significant price increase in the first 3 months of this year. In January, that was 3.9%, I remind you. In February, 2.2%, and in March, 1.2%. So in April, the inflation was 0.5%. I mean, the growth of inflation was 0.5%. So the trend is really to lower the rates of inflation growth. We have a sustainable budget. Our financial and banking systems have adapted to the new conditions. We have managed to stabilize the currency exchange rate and keep our currency reserves intact. And I'd like to highlight that did not put any barriers to free flow of capital in our country, just like in 2008, 2009. The federal budget deficit in February and from February to May 2015 is 1,048 billion rubles. That is 3.6% of the GDP. We expect that this deficit at the end of the year would be 3.7%. in accordance with the current budget law. The forex reserves in Russia are more than 300. Well, I've been discussing that with Ms. Elvira Nabiulina. So as of 5th June, this was $360.6 billion. Now a bit less because we've been using the funds. But the reserve fund, the governmental reserve fund, has accumulated $76.25 billion. That is 5.5% of the GDP. And the volume of our second fund, National Welfare Fund, is $75.86 billion. That is 5.5% of the GDP as well. We didn't let the unemployment to rise, and now it is 5.8% of the economically active population. I'd remind you that in 2008, in the crisis, the unemployment rose to 8.3%. The sanctions introduced boosted our work in import replacement, and on the number of areas we have made significant progress and significant result on import substitution. We have good results in machinery, building, petrochemistry, light industry and manufacturing industry, pharmaceuticals, and some other industries as well. A really demonstrative example is the agro-industrial sector achievements. And of course, we have to do a lot in this direction still. But for example, the dairy production in January-April 2015 has grown by 3.6% as compared with the same period previous year. Or butter 8%, cheese 29%, and fish by 6%, meat by 12 or 13%. So the import substitution program has its nature in not barricading oneself from the world economy, but to learn to produce, manufacture competitive products which would be in demand not only in Russia but in the global markets. And the final task is to fully and effectively use our inner domestic capabilities to solve the development tasks. I'd like to repeat that we respond to external restriction not by closing our economy, but by expanding the freedom and raising the openness of Russia. And this is not just a slogan, it is the real content of our real policy. And the work which we are now performing, creating the conditions for the business to look for new partners and open new markets, to participate in the implementation of the largest integrational projects. I'd like to say that for the last year, more than 60 enterprises with the foreign participation have begun their work, practical work. And during our forum, we are opening several high technological enterprises, including here in St. Petersburg, the pharmaceuticals, and on the gas turbines production with our partners. I'd like to thank the representatives of all the partners. I'd like to thank all our partners who, despite the known political problems, continue to work in Russia to invest their capitals and technologies and create enterprises and new jobs here. Thank you very much for that, dear friends. Ladies and gentlemen, the measures of supporting economy and financial system, which have been taken very quickly, overall worked well. And now we are concentrating on solving systemic tasks. We have the long-term development in our agenda. Our task is to ensure sustainable growth, raise the efficiency of the economy, the performance of labor, and the inflow investments. Our priorities is improving the business climate, staff training for economy and government, and education and technologies. I'd like to dwell on these issues a bit more. I'll begin with raising the quality of the business environment and competitiveness of the Russian jurisdiction. Our position is that we would like to create the utmost free, predictable, and favorable conditions and opportunities for investors in order for them to be profitable to invest in Russia. We have taken the decision to freeze the tax interests for the next 4 years and do not increase the fiscal fiscal burden on the business, so that the companies would plan their work on the midterm. And we will follow this policy despite the external conditions and the budget load. And I have actually given you the figures that would say that our reserve funds allow for such policies to be implemented. With that, we create additional stimuli for new and developing companies. And I'd like to remind you that we've taken a decision to introduce the tax holidays to individual entrepreneurs to lower the fiscal burden, fiscal load on this SMEs within the special taxation regimes. And also we've taken the decision to give the taxation benefits for the new creating industrial enterprises, the so-called greenfields. Yesterday we discussed with the heads of our industrial enterprises a number of problems which they face. And there was a proposal that we make similar regulation and make similar benefits for new investments as such, and not only in greenfield projects. And we will analyze these proposals, of course. I think that we will be able to implement them in the end. I'd like to add that we also free from make tax-exempt capitals and assets that come back to Russia from abroad. Their owners have full guarantees to be protected from any persecution. At the same time, we will take steps to raise the transparency of Russian companies and their subsidiaries abroad. The amendments have been introduced into our legislation, and they fully agree with the decisions of G20, FATF, and other international organizations. Within the National Entrepreneurial Initiative, we have updated the federal legislation drastically, which regulates the conditions for business activities. We are changing the approaches of the authorities and of the monitoring bodies to work with the entrepreneurs. They are becoming more clear, transparent, and open. I'd like to say that since 2016, there will be no inspections on the small enterprises for the next 3 years. Those enterprises which have not yet had the serious violations. We understand that for the national jurisdiction to be more competitive, we must move forward constantly and update constantly. But with it, we have to analyze how effective and efficient are the measures already taken. And here we must have efficient feedback from business. That is why I'd like the Agency of Strategical Initiatives and the leading business communities to analyze this law enforcement practice and analyze the best world best practices and world best experience, and if it is necessary, to propose new decisions. The national investment climate rating for the Russian regions has an important role to play. The rating itself is, of course, not the target per se. It should become a working tool of finding and expanding the best regional practices throughout all the territory of the country. By the way, the initiative to create this rating was coming from our leading business communities. And the peculiarity of this project is that the entrepreneurs themselves assess the business situation, the quality of state management, etc. By the way, this year, more than 200,000 business people from all the territory of Russia took part in these questionnaires. I'd like to say that we have already had the examples of this positive situation throughout the discussions, but I'd like to use this opportunity to name them again, because it is really worth. So these are Tatarstan, Kaluga region, Belgorod region, Tambov region, and Ulyanovsk region, Kostromskaya region, Krasnodar territory, Rostov region, Chuvash Republic, Tula region. I'd like to highlight the national investment climate rating should become an efficient tool of raising the quality of governance and management on all the layers of power. This is one of our key development areas as well. In this regard, I'd like to say that first, we need to form the whole class of state managers who know how to work flexibly in a modern way, who understand the demands of business towards the business climate and to the public management as such. One of the important steps is launching a mechanism of the constant upgrading and updating of the staff, constant staff training. And we are aiming to create the center of exchanging best practices in public management, public governance, and creating the business environment in the regions. Such a center could become a platform for raising the effectiveness and new skills, and also the platform for developing new ideas and setting horizontal linkages between representatives of the regional governance teams. Second, I believe it necessary to create special staffs in each region, the so-called project offices, if we may say so, which would become the so-called administrations of development, which would ensure the implementation of the best mechanisms of creating favorable investment climate. Because the comfortable business climate or business environment is an important condition for creating the mass layer of non-raw SMEs. That's a real way to diversify economy and create new jobs. Our goal is to make SMEs grow and win the domestic market and develop their export potential. That is why we would connect the activities of the industry supports institutions and the institution of stimulating, which stimulate export. I'm speaking about the Industry Development Fund, the Far East Development Fund, Russian Direct Investment Fund, project financing mechanisms, and also the Russian Export Center, where domestic companies will be able to receive all the range of services on supporting their products on the foreign markets. Besides, on the proposal of the business community, we are creating the cooperation to develop small and medium entrepreneurship. The business will be able to receive the necessary financial, legal, and methodological support here, including the access to public procurement and state-owned companies' procurement. We are consolidating the mechanism of supporting SMEs, and we expect that this will give us good feedback and good result, will be efficient. Ladies and gentlemen, all those who want to be leading must follow leaders in business and in governance and, of course, in technologies and education. We've done a lot to strengthen the domestic R&D basis, to increase cooperation of science, education, and industry, to implement the ideas and projects into the real production. In the forthcoming years, we would like to technologically upgrade our industries in the raw and non-raw area of our industry, and also the agriculture. Since 2019, through the technical regulation and clear environmental standards, we will stimulate the gradual implementation of the best technologies principles. The modernization and technological development would become the demand on the legislation. We must create the incentives for the companies to invest in developing domestic technologies, and I'd like to ask the government to propose additional solutions in that. Besides, we must take stock of the existing support mechanisms to support the practical research and implement innovations, which should analyze how the benefits, including taxation benefits, are working. As far as the development institutions are concerned, they must be fully calibrated to correspond to the task of technological modernizations. We are launching projects which are aimed at ensuring strong technological basis for our companies, not only today but in future as well. Besides, the horizons of technological planning are expanding greatly. Russian companies must take the key positions in those industries and in those markets which would determine the character of the economy and the lifestyle of people 2 and 3 decades later. It has happened with the IT technologies for the recent 2 decades because they have drastically changed our life. To solve these prospective tasks, we have launched the National Technological Initiative, where the representatives of science and technology and business participate. It is evident that it is a long-term project, but in 2 or 3 years there should emerge the scientific laboratories, new companies, educational programs for staff training and HR training, which would be able to solve the most modern task and work with the most advanced technologies. And another important direction, at the recent session of one of our leading business associations, the Business Russia, a proposal was voiced to organize the system of the transfer of foreign technologies. We have successful experience in moving to Russia the technologies in pharmaceuticals, car manufacturing, and consumption goods production. We must make this work systematic, and we must use the capitals of the development institutions. So I'd like to ask the government and business communities to make concrete proposals in this regard, including to create the optimal cooperation format of the state and the business in the transfer of technologies. We also understand well that the quality of education is of utmost importance to raise the competitiveness of Russia. By the way, yesterday our colleagues from the foreign investment companies were speaking about that as well as I met them.
At the same time, specialists training have to take into account not only the reality of today, but also the best world experience and the prospects of technologies development and the development of new markets. Our schoolboys and girls are winning the most prestigious international competitions in technical and natural disciplines. Let me just give you one example. Students of St. Petersburg Research University of Information Technologies, Mechanics and Optics have proven several times that they are undisputed leaders in the world. And this year, the university's team has proved that, again, they left behind the strongest world programming schools. They won the team school championship 6 times. Let me congratulate them on this achievement one more time. Obviously, a lot depends on university's management and on the rector. In this area, we also need leaders of a new type, those who know what the needs of industry are, who feel the trends of technological development. Russian enterprises suggest that we should create a reserve of managers, university managers, for higher education institutions that prepare engineers and technical specialists. I believe it is a right initiative and we have to implement it. At the same time, I am calling upon representatives of businesses to work more actively in supervisory and trusteeship boards of universities. They could also participate in shaping and implementing their development programs. It could be in the interests of businesses themselves. A very important task we are facing now is improving the quality of vocational training. We also have to strengthen its ties with the real sector. In many regions, we've been successfully developing dual education programs, when apprenticeship at specific companies is combined with vocational education. And it is no coincidence that the regions that have achieved a lot in developing vocational training are at the same time leaders in the regional investment rating. And at the same time, they are enjoying a high social and economic dynamics. Today, our engineers and manual labor workers have to be very highly qualified. That is why we are building a system of modern professional standards. The participants here are employers, business associations, and we are doing that within the National Council for Competences and Qualifications at the President of the Russian Federation. I think it is essential to consolidate our efforts and to build a holistic system of human resources training based on the best international practices. This system should include all the links, additional education in the area of technical creative education of children, vocational training and high education and engineering, as well as the national and international championships of manual labor workers. And I'd like to dwell on another important area for the years to come. We have to create a mechanism of supporting talented children so that they could fully develop their potential and to be very successful in their own country, in Russia. We are launching a project in this area, which is a social center for school children from all the country's region. Children who are very talented in sports, arts, and natural sciences come to the center to further study. The map of the global economic development is changing very rapidly. Asia and the Pacific countries like China, Japan, South Korea, as well as ASEAN states, already account for 1/4 of the global economy. And these are the markets that will be the main powerhouse of the global consumption growth for the years to come. Given all the fluctuations that are taking place in the global economy, this trend is developing. We are working together with our partners at the Eurasian Economic Union, and we are building up our ties with Asia and the Pacific countries. We are trying to eliminate barriers in trade and investments. This year, Eurasian Economic Union has concluded its first free trade area agreement with Vietnam. Russian companies will be able to export a whole range of items with no customs fees. In May this year, we signed a joint agreement on linking Eurasian Economic Union's development and the economic union of the new Silk Road. We are expanding our cooperation with China. We are actually speaking of new approaches to interaction between the Eurasian Economic Union and China. It also implies expansion of our cooperation and implementing big infrastructural projects and easing the trade procedures. We are also trying to strengthen the cooperation among our financial institutions. Strengthening partnership with Asia and Pacific countries is a very important aspect of our work aimed at developing the Far East of Russia. We are trying to create favorable business conditions for capital movement and industry movement. Investors will get a unique chance to work at the Russian market. At the moment, at the Far East of Russia, there are territories of advanced development with a whole range of tax benefits and benefits of other kinds. We are launching a system of state support of big investment projects. At the same time, we are ready to offer even more flexible, more sophisticated mechanisms of support. Our government has already prepared a bill on building a free port of Vladivostok. This bill is going to cover all the key ports of Primorsky region from Zarubino to Nakotka in 13 areas. The residents of the port area will get wide benefits that will not be limited only to tax benefits. Visa regime will be eased for them, and they will also enjoy a customs-free zone. In September this year, we are going to host the first Eastern Economic Forum, where we'll dwell in details on our suggestions. Let me reiterate that we are committed to cooperation with everyone who is ready to work based on equal rights and mutual respect, with all those who is interested in implementing mutually beneficial projects. I am convinced that the trade and economic partnership with the countries of Latin America is a very promising area. Our cooperation with BRICS countries is also very important, and it will definitely facilitate the expansion of our new business contacts. I believe that the summit that we are going to host in July will further strengthen our ties. Let me reiterate that active cooperation with the new centers of global growth and development does not mean that we will attach less importance to the dialogue with our traditional Western partners. Ladies and gentlemen, Russia is open for the world. We are open for economic, scientific, and humanitarian interaction. We are open for contacts with the civil society representatives and businesses from all over the world. I am sure that this dialogue is totally in our common interests. It helps us to preserve the trust that we've been enjoying, and that serves the foundation for our joint work. We are facing big tasks today. We are going to enter new markets, to develop new technologies, and to implement wide-scale projects. We are joined by entrepreneurs and citizens. In our country, there are new leaders who are ready to work for Russia for its development. We are sure that we are going to be successful. Thank you.